So I have had many requests to get going on this dream truck again. So here we are. I don't necessarily really have the time to do this right now, but I would like to continue on. I hate leaving things for a long time because then you forget. And it's already been at least 6 months since I even laid a finger on this. So in this video, I definitely want to get this truck running. It hasn't run in over a year, mainly because we stripped it down to nothing, started over with it, and then we proceeded to install a drive axle on the front. So we have four-wheel drive now. That was a whole fiasco just in itself. And we also put air suspension on the rear. But now we're back to the basics of just putting everything back together and getting it running, putting fluids in many different locations. So the first thing I want to start with is installing a fuel tank and installing the battery box. Those two things are absolutely first before I can even think about starting this truck. I did locate a brand new battery box. I think you guys saw before I had a really hard time trying to figure out whether I was going to restore the old one, which was absolutely, there was nothing left to it, or whether I'd find a used one off a truck. That didn't work out. Eventually I just got lucky and I found this for almost nothing. And it's brand new. I was almost going to fabricate a new one, but it's just too involved to do that kind of thing. After all this hard work on this truck, not reusing the hardware is like so nice. Especially when I take the time to sandblast everything off, paint everything, start over fresh. It just makes assembling things so much better. So much more satisfying too. Okay, so we still got a little bit of a mess here that we got to figure out. We got the fuse box, which needs to go in here. This needs to be mounted to there. We got to hook up all our grounds and then all of our positive wires to this fuse assembly. So this is one of the most daunting parts here. Let's see if we can get this right. I know it's going to take a while. And we have a bunch of wires that we took out. I think most of that's just junk, but I saved all of it just in case. It is really confusing with all of the wires. There's so many accessories on this truck that I tried to eliminate as much as I could, but hopefully I didn't make a mistake somewhere. Okay. Oh, I love the memory that these things have. You can just feel that they're in the right spot. They're pre-bent, and they just sort of go right back in that spot, and it's so satisfying. Okay, so we got our ground lugs right here. Figured out where all the grounds went. Look at all those. There's at least a half a dozen right there. And then I figured out where all the positive wires go. This stuff may not mean much to you guys, but figuring this stuff back out is really nice. One wire routed in the wrong spot makes a nightmare. But every one of these wires feels like it goes there, which is really satisfying. I'm about 5 minutes away from hooking a battery up and seeing what things are doing. Alright, so after literally a day and a half worth of diagnosing, I could not get this thing to crank. There was no point in me showing what I was doing because it was just getting frustrating. I couldn't figure out why basically what was happening was the computer wasn't sending a signal to the start relay to be able to turn starter over. Everything else on the starting circuit was working. It was just a ground that activates the relay, which then activates the starter. That ground wasn't being sent from the ECM. So finally I traced it back to a wire that was underneath in this battery box. It was this one wire right here, it's 10 gauge, and it needed a ground. And I tried hooking it up before, but it immediately sparked a lot and the wire heated up a lot. And so basically I thought that wire shouldn't be hooked up because it was just getting so hot and it was sparking. But basically why it was sparking was because there's the preheater on the air intake that preheats the air before it goes into the chamber. A lot of diesel engines have that instead of glow plugs. It's just a little grid heater that heats the incoming air, which helps it start in cold weather. Well, when I would hook that up, that would turn on, and that's what made it heat up so much. But when I put a thicker wire on and let it sit there for 30 seconds, then it turned off, and then that enabled me to start the engine, because that was a ground for the ECM, or something to do with the ECM anyways. So I was racking my brain out trying to figure that out. I have the wiring diagram for this truck, and I was just going through everything trying to figure out what was going on. Because I could bypass that ground and I could give it a ground and get it to start, but I knew it wasn't going to actually start because the ECM wouldn't be sending signal to the injectors and all kinds of other things. So finally, I can come in here, turn the key over, and there's also a lot more lights that light up now too. But now I can, oops, I gotta hit the neutral safety switch. But we're not ready to start this thing yet, so I still got to do a bunch of things before I can do that. There's a lot of miscellaneous wires and pipes and stuff that I need to get out of the way so I don't hit them with the fan. So there's going to be different segments to this video. The first segment is just getting this engine started. There's going to be very little hooked up when it happens, just because I want to get this out of the way first. So right now I need to concentrate on putting the fuel tank in, getting fuel in it, getting fuel into the fuel filter, pumping it in so I can get all the air out. I also need to configure things so that nothing gets hit by the fan. I also need to add some engine oil and a filter, which that's like 8 gallons at least. Crazy amount of oil. And if you guys have been watching this build for a while, you know that I had to actually turn that oil pan around because originally the sump was at the front of it, which would not have allowed me to get this axle in here. This axle sits higher than a normal axle because it's four-wheel drive. It's just straight across. A normal axle comes over, dips down, and dips back up again, so it doesn't matter how the oil pan is. But in this case, the only way for me to get this axle in here was to put this oil pan with the sump on the rear which in order to do that, I had to go through all kinds of crazy stuff. I had to actually weld on a tube because I couldn't find the right sump tube. So I had to weld that all up and put it back together, and hopefully everything's all right with that. But the first thing I need to do is just make sure that there's oil pressure. And we're not gonna worry about the coolant because even if it starts, I'm gonna shut it off right away. That's not gonna be an issue. But I do need to worry about the power steering because that may start pumping out fluid as soon as I turn that on. So I do need to get that hooked up. I still don't have any drive shafts on, so we gotta figure that out. Anyways, this tank right here is one that I wanted to try to use for my main tank, which will be underneath the driver's side. This tank is bigger than a normal tank. We did a lot of work to try to polish this tank, and we were kind of successful, but not really. We didn't finish it up, but this is several more hours worth of polishing to get this even close to good enough. But for right now, I'm gonna hook it up anyways. That's stupid. Okay, just to give you an idea of how much oil this thing takes, here's the oil filter. This is about 5 inches in diameter, about 13, 14 inches wide. That is an oil filter. Yes, sir. So I just pre-filled this filter, and I swear there's close to a gallon of oil in this thing. Okay, so after trying to wrestle that giant oil filter into here, I realized that it's not the right one. I got that thing close to a year ago. So I remember I looked it up for a DT466E, but apparently they have different oil filter housings. So what I've discovered since then is that there's external threads. Normally it's threaded in the middle opening right there, but on these it's threaded up here. So while that's not a rare thing, it's also not as common as being threaded in the center. So I called International to get the right filter number because relying on parts stores is rarely good with these big trucks. So I just spent several hours online trying to figure this out. This is literally the only filter that has an M95 thread on it. That's 2.0. They have an M95 2.5 all day long, but not a 2.0. So basically what it amounts to, this filter will go on there, but it's nearly hitting this housing, the differential housing. So here, I'll show you. So look at that. I have 1.5 inches of clearance to the differential housing. So I'm at a really big dilemma here. I've done research for hours to try to figure out what to do about this. Yet again, the 4-wheel drive is holding me up from everything. So my options are I can try to get a different filter housing. That seems to be impossible because it's got all kinds of different ports because of the EGR and the turbo and just the cooler and all kinds of stuff. There's just not an easy option to get another oil filter housing. So then I figured, well, maybe I can look into one of those lifetime filters. They're like stainless steel mesh that you buy once, and it would appear to me that those would be smaller. Well, I can't seem to find one for this truck. So then I'm thinking like, maybe somebody can make me a custom filter. So I looked into that, but the problem is it's Friday night. So I don't have any options as far as talking to anybody until next week. And even if I do, I I don't think that that's a great option to have a custom oil filter. But I have one more idea that I might be able to accomplish. Let me show you. So on this oil filter housing, you see those bolts right there? There's 3 bolts, and I think they hold on this piece right here, just like from here to here, I think. Let's pop those off and see if we can take that off, and maybe I can replace it or do something to it. So maybe instead of replacing the whole oil filter housing, maybe I can just replace that one part right there. Look at that. You know, I also just discovered that I had another filter on here that says 4300 on it. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how many different filters fit this truck, but maybe that one was just labeled wrong or something. But I have some ideas of what I can do here. Let me just do some research. All right, so I just got done with a whole bunch of research on things, trying to figure out what the best solution to this problem is. Like I said, it's Friday and there is no hope for getting another one of these. I think they may make different ones that just bolt onto there depending on what kind of filter you want to use. But I can't seem to find that part. There's a part number right there. I think it's a part number, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't bring up anything. So I don't know if this is part of the whole filter housing and it's not like separate and maybe you can't buy a separate one. I really don't know. But in any case, I'm not going to wait a week to get something anyways. So since this is round, what do you guys think we can do with this? I happen to have this machine right here that may be of use. So here's what I've come up with. After doing a whole bunch of research to figure out what filter I want to use and what I can adapt to this, I've come across this. This is a 1970 filter. I think it's for a bigger Cummins engine, and the threads on the inside are 1.5 inches by 12, so 12 threads per inch. So you can thread with this lathe right here, with these settings right here. Now this is going to be threads per inch, which is different than metric. So a lot of metric filters you'd have to convert to inch. But here's the thing. I don't have enough experience on this machine to actually cut threads, but I happen to have this, which is 1.5 inches by 12 threads. I just used this on my telehandler to chase the threads on one of the cylinders, and it wasn't cheap for this. So here's what I'm thinking. What we can do, we can machine down this surface right here to accept this die. So that takes care of the center. That will just go right into there. And then what we can do is we can cut down the old threads and just make that flat. And then basically that seal will be right where that is. So I need to machine that down nice, not leave any burrs on it. And I could cut the threads in the center with this lathe because this is inches. But I don't feel comfortable enough to do that, especially going up against the shoulder. So I believe the way this works is there's a seal just past these threads, and I think the threads actually thread into that seal. So I don't think I have to have like a tapered area after the threads. If I did, I'd have to get it just right, but I don't think I do. I think I just need to thread it all the way, and I think that's good enough. Personally, I think just the threads against threads, is probably good enough, because that's where it's pushing the oil back into the engine. And if it leaks a little bit out, it just kind of bypasses and goes right back around the filter system. It's not like it's throwing dirty oil back up into the engine. I think the biggest challenge is going to be chucking this. So I'd like to just put it straight up against there, but my chucks don't open up quite enough. the jaws just don't open up enough to do this. And I thought that these would be reversible. It only makes sense that these steps would be on there because they were reversible. But apparently not. I think those steps are there in case you want to put those jaws inside of a pipe. Like if you had a pipe that you put and you clamp them going outward, I think that's what they're there for. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize they weren't reversible. So there's these little worm drive type of teeth on here on the back, and they're curved just slightly on this side only. So if you flip them around, they don't catch in there. Not that I can see anyways, because the teeth inside of there that catch it are curved going around a circle. So this is the opposite curve if you flip that around. From what I see, a lot of these are reversible, and these little teeth on there have a curve on both sides to allow that to happen. But apparently these are not. I did not realize that. So I think what we're going to have to do is machine a shaft that goes in the middle of this and kind of press fits in here, and then we can put it in there, and then that will center everything. I think that's the only way we can make this work. The problem that I just discovered is this side is much smaller than this side, which means what? It means that's tapered. So that kind of throws a wrench in that whole works. But nevertheless, this was made on a lathe, so somehow we can get this to work. I think what we're going to have to do is create a shaft that goes through there that has a taper on it. That's definitely way more advanced than I know how to do, but I guess we're going to learn. This seems like a nice challenge. I got plenty of old pins around here. Like this is a pin from my Gale skid steer. This is bigger than that just slightly, so it's perfect. I don't know what kind of material this is. It might be a little harder than I really want to use, but I have, I don't know, 6 or 8 of these laying around just doing nothing. So might as well try it. I think even if we don't get a nice smooth taper that's perfect OD on both sides, I think as long as we can step it down a few increments and end up with the right OD on this side and the other side, then we should be able to press it on there and it will do its job of just kind of centering this piece in here. So close now. Alright, so this is what I was trying to accomplish. You know, some people need to see better what I'm talking about, but basically I need to be able to have this sticking out so that I can put that in the chuck. So I wanted it to hit right here and hit right here with a slight taper on both. And right now, that's what I've accomplished. It's hitting on this side fully. There's no wobbling around. It's hitting on this side fully. No wobbling around. So now I should be able to give this a couple taps with a hammer, and this should be a press fit in here, and then I can put this into the chuck. With any luck, that's what I need. Because the taper is bigger on this side, it's going to want to pull out, but it can't. So it might not pull out at all. So this is steel. I have no idea what kind of steel. It doesn't seem like it's that hard though. But basically I think the first thing we need to do is take off this whole threaded area right here, because it's kind of in the way of doing work to here. Hey, it worked. You can't laugh. That's my first successful part. It parted its ways. I had to slow this thing down to about 50 RPMs to make it work and to stop the chatter. I don't know what that's about. I'll have to investigate. But anyways, so now we got to take down that shoulder manually. We can't really cut it anymore because this flange, I could cut the flange off. It's really not needed. But at the same time, I can also just turn my tooling that way and just start milling down that little shoulder right there. And I think I'll do that before I even worry about turning this down for threading. Okay, so I know a boring bar probably isn't really what I want to use right now, but I'm running out of carbide tips and I have a bunch of the ones for the boring bar, so let's try those. I can get most of that shoulder milled down with this boring bar, and then after that we can just touch it up. And I think I only have 1 or 2 inserts left. This may not work. I may have to actually figure out how to make threads. Well, I could do that. I have the right tooling. And I do have, I don't know, I would say an extra ½ inch that I'm probably going to cut off anyways, because this is just too long. Oh, actually, you know what? I have close to an inch that I can cut off. Let's see if we can do this. So if we're looking for 12 threads per inch, that's A6. So put that right on the 6. Right on the A. So A6. Okay. Let's get our thread cutting tool on. I want to let you guys know that I've never done this before, so this may be a total disaster, or I may be walking away pretty proud. Alright, so I just realized that there's a little bit of backlash on my feed here, so I don't think I want to keep going with this. I think at this point I could actually use my regular die and just sort of clean up the threads. Because what I really don't want to do is mess this up and then have to weld it all and then spin it down. I'd rather just not get involved in that. Might be a chore. Want to give me that other oil in there? You gotta go a little bit and then turn back.
Why do you have to turn back afterwards?
Get the shavings out. All right, there's the finished product right there. Not too bad. It took some fine adjusting at the end because I had to cut into the shoulder just a little bit more because the threads were bottoming out before the seal fully engaged. The seal was engaged and it probably wouldn't leak, but you know that feeling when you put on an oil filter and when you get to the end you can feel there's just like you're squishing the gasket? Well, you had a little bit of that feeling and then it just stopped dead. So I just had to make some adjustments so that it can just kind of keep going. So now, even when you're tightening it up, I gave it like another 3/16 of threads. So that's plenty. Goes on nice. Also, it engages the seal down below there. Just as you're starting to kiss this area here with this gasket, it starts to engage that gasket in there. And the way you can tell is the inner part will start spinning. So a lot of this may not make sense to some people, but yeah, this thing's ready to go. So I just got to put my O-rings back on. I took those off just for machining. And then we can put this filter in. So a little bit about this filter. This filter is about 4 inches shorter than the other one. So now we have about 5 inches, 5.5 inches of clearance between the differential and the bottom of this filter. So should be good to go. So now look how much room we have. It's about 5 inches, maybe almost 6. That should be plenty. You know, it wouldn't be such a big deal, but the differential is right here. The peak height of this axle is right here, which is right underneath of this filter. Nothing but problems with this axle. This truck just wasn't designed for it. And International doesn't like sharing their secrets about how they make it work, because they do outfit these trucks with this axle. This is the axle that you use for it. But International just doesn't like revealing their secrets. They will build you a truck brand new. You'll wait 2 years for it, and it'll be several $100,000. But as far as retrofitting an older truck, which this isn't even that old of a truck, it's a 2006, but they're not interested in outfitting this truck. Anyways, that's done. What I thought would be just installing an oil filter and filling this up with oil, 5 minutes worth of work, turned into a day worth of work and a half a night worth of frustration trying to figure it out. But overall, I'm happy with the outcome. I did learn a lot on the lathe. I got a lot of practice in. Now the only problem is, because I rushed into this, I did not learn until after I was done, of course, that I could have done the taper on that one shaft. I could have done it with this compound slide right here, which this slide you can make any angle you want. So I could have figured out what angle I want and just slightly tilted that, and then you just run it in, and as you're running it in, it creates the taper. I wish I would have known that before I started, but at least I know it now. Also, I'm going to look for reversible jaws for this. A lot of these lathes that I see have these jaws where they have 2 bolts in them, and you just take the 2 bolts out, you flip them around. So I'll either have to get a whole new chuck, or I'll have to get new jaws, because I definitely don't want to be limited by like a 4-inch capacity or whatever it is. Like, yeah, you have 14 inches of swing room, but the jaws can only accommodate about 4 inches or maybe even a little less. So we'll check into that. I just got this lathe and I wanted to make a video about tuning it up and making some parts and learning, but at the same time I kind of had this that I had to do, so I kind of am skipping around a little bit here. I don't even have a video for this yet, but I will be making it soon. All right, so now we can put our mortgage payment of oil in here. Would you look at that? Oh boy! This thing hasn't been started in a year. You know, for those of you that are just tuning in on this truck for the first time, or even just recently, you might not know how much of an accomplishment that is, but that thing starting right now, starting how quick it did, that is a major milestone. Stripping this thing down to the frame and starting over again, 1 bolt at a time, putting it back together, dealing with all the setbacks with that axle, the transmission, the transfer case, the second transfer case. Well, let me start over again. The first axle, the second axle, and now the third axle, and now the transfer case, and then the first transfer case, and then the second transfer case, the first transmission, and then the second transmission, the first rear end, and now the second rear end. That is so relieving to have this thing start like that. With 1 battery, mind you. That thing should have 3 batteries in there. I can't believe it started with 1 battery. And to not have fluids spraying all over. We have a lot of work ahead of us to get this thing driving again. And even more work ahead of us to put it on the road. But we are over the hump. So there's still a lot of wires that I need to figure out where they go. Apparently they're not very important because the engine still started. And there's a lot of extra stuff on here that I don't really care about. But I guess having headlights and blinkers and maybe a few essential sensors working is good, but we got to figure that all out still. And I don't even want to think about the air system. That is going to be just a huge project. But 1 step at a time. Now we can put some coolant in here, make sure that doesn't leak anywhere. At least we know that it holds the oil. The oil isn't spraying all over somewhere. It holds fuel. That isn't spraying all over. The new tank works. The only thing that's a little bit iffy right now is the oil pressure gauge is staying at 70 psi even when I turn it off. So that's a little bit questionable. I got to figure out what's going on with that. let me give you a little rundown of where we're at right now. So I got this started. It seems to run good. I'm not running it for too long because I don't have any coolant in it yet. But it seems to run when I want it to, and I don't really see any problems. The turbo isn't really hooked up. I mean, the exhaust part of it's hooked up, but I don't have the intake hooked up there to the intercooler, which means that it's really not doing anything. Plus, I don't have any exhaust on it right now. It's just coming straight out of the turbo. The one thing I've been trying to solve is when you turn on the key and you're looking for oil pressure, that oil pressure gauge is just staying right there, right at 70 psi. And also, it's not reading the correct volts because it has definitely more than 9 volts. It's actually fully charged right now. And also, that comes on too, which is going to be check electrical system. And it beeps like crazy. Also, the fuel gauge isn't working right. So I went down a few rabbit holes that took me a day and a half, and I'm finally done working on it because I just don't feel like going any further with it. But basically, there's a communication system on this that's the J1939, and something's not working on it right. You're supposed to have a terminating resistor on each end of the backbone of that communication system for the drivetrain. And it appears that I do have the resistors and they are working, but as soon as I hook up this control module, the resistance kind of fluctuates. So something's definitely wrong. But not to complicate or bore you guys out, I'm gonna probably have the dealer look at that with their scanner because I don't have any way to scan it. So as much as I hate giving up on something, I'm gonna give up on that whole thing for right now. The thing starts, I'm sure it will drive because it's just a manual transmission, so it's not looking for any kind of inputs to switch gears with an automatic transmission or anything. So at this point, what I need to do is get this thing to be able to drive at least enough to drive on a lowboy, off a lowboy, into their garage so that they can check the codes. So we can do a lot of other work in the meantime. So what I've been trying to move forward and work on is getting the transmission all wrapped up. And so to do that, I don't have the clutch pedal hooked up right now because the linkage that goes to the transmission, last time I tried to adjust it and it broke, so I had to get a new link rod. And I got one, but just like the old one, it's not long enough for some reason. I think it's because that transmission just requires a different rod. But rather than try to find a different rod for this thing, I'm not interested in doing that. I've gone down that rabbit hole many times with this truck. Trying to get things to convert this truck to something else just doesn't work. International just has no support for you. The parts are available. I'm sure I can get that rod, but to track down the right part number is just impossible. If you want this truck brand new, built the way you want it, they will surely find that for you. But to take an existing truck and try to upgrade it, it's impossible. So at this point, I'm going to machine that rod to be just a little bit longer. It really only needs to be about a ½ inch longer, but I'm going to make it an inch longer because there's plenty of adjustment. So this is the rod right here, and I don't think it's stainless steel, so we should be able to weld to it no problem. I'm going to build a sleeve for this so that I can extend this, and it's got an OD of 9/16, which in the machinist world sounds kind of crude, but it literally is 9/16. So I might be able to find a pipe that's got the right ID, but I can also just take this and I can drill it out with a 9/16 bit, and then I can turn down the outside. This is probably just mild steel, I would guess. So let's go ahead and get this chucked up, and we'll try to get this machine down into a sleeve. Another nice little practice project. Now it does seem to be wobbling around, but I can tell you that This is also just bent, just from hammering it so much. So we'll just turn it down nice and true. So my carbide insert selection is very, very low right now. I ordered what I thought would be more, but they just came in today and they don't work. They're too small. So now I'm down to just one of these, and I have like 2 of these. So we're just gonna work with what we got. Alright, so that's what it looks like. Just about 4 inches long. So it leaves 1.5 inches on each side that it overlaps the existing piece, and then 1 inch in the middle. And it's so cool to think that I just turned that out of a piece of scrap steel I had laying around. And the coolest part is just getting the bore in the middle, because that's not really an easy thing to do. Because in order for the boring bar to work, I need at least 7/8 of an inch of a bore to start with. More like 1 inch actually. So you can't use a boring bar for that. I don't know what kind of steel this is, so I'm taking a chance on cutting this with the cold saw, but I think it should be fine. Would have liked to had a little bit better of a fit, but as far as what I was seeing, it's got like a 10 thou kind of fit on it, which is not really great, but I'm gonna weld it, so it really doesn't matter. Honestly, I think I'm being just way too worried about it because it really doesn't matter. It's a clutch pedal. So we'll just extend it about that much. Should be good to go. All right, so I'm gonna center both of them. I'm gonna make a mark. I'm gonna bring them back 1/2 inch each. All right, so this side I welded and then I turned it down. This side I welded and I couldn't turn it down because just the shape of this thing won't allow that to happen. But again, I'm worrying about it too much. Let's go put this in. So right now we're getting ready to mount these seats. So on the bottom, I'm going to weld this 1/4 inch flat stock, and then it bolts into the cab. So we're just drilling the holes. So inside of the cab, if you guys remember, I did all this work to this cab. I welded on new pieces. But I made sure to keep the existing holes because I didn't want to mess up the measurements. I didn't want to have to guess where these seats go. So the holes are here. The straps are going to attach right to here and they'll be welded onto the seats. Before, in the back, they had a giant piece of 1/4 inch diamond plate that all 3 seats were mounted to at the same time, and they were just welded right to it. And I don't want that. I want to be able to put in and take out seats individually. Before I put the seats in, I'm going to go ahead and mount this shifter in there. But before I can mount the shifter, I need to fill the transmission with fluid. But before I can fill it with fluid, I need to put the cover on the bottom where the PTO would be mounted to. Okay, so I got some fluid in the transmission. Let's go ahead and mount this shifter. I haven't mounted it yet. I'm hoping it fits. It should fit. I had to buy that separately from the transmission and it was kind of hard to find it. so if you guys remember, this transfer case is brand new, which is crazy because I think these are $17,000 from the factory. I got this for $1,800. Never had fluid in it, so let's go ahead and put some fluid in it right now. It takes synthetic 50 weight, just like a transmission would on a heavy duty truck like this. And from what I'm reading, it takes almost 5 gallons. Okay, so apparently it does have fluid. I don't know why it would have fluid. That's kind of weird. But this has never been used. Look, these plugs are still in these yokes. It's definitely never been hooked up to anything. It's not a bad thing that it has fluid in it though, because that's $120 worth of fluid. Alright, so moving right along here, I just got back from the drivetrain shop and I had this modified. This was actually meant to adapt from my new transmission, which was an SPL 170 U-joint, but then I changed the yoke on it so that it takes a 1710. So that's this end. And then the old transfer case was a 1610, so I had this on there. And it was like $1,600 to make this thing. So now I have a 1710 on this side, so 1710 and 1710. I had to have him shorten it though, so there is the actual tubing, which is basically just this piece butted up against the other piece, and then just a small piece of tubing that connects them. So that's the drive shaft between the transmission and the transfer case. So I was actually able to reuse my weld yoke from my other drive shaft. Well, there's 3 other drive shafts from before. It was a 3-piece. So we were able to use one piece here, which saves me a little bit of money. That's what I have left of all my drive shafts, all 3 of them, which is still something because I still got a weld yoke and I still got a bracket if I need to hang another carrier bearing. So I wanted to go with a 1-piece from the transfer case to the rear end. I kind of planned it out to do that. I wanted to keep it short enough to do that for the rear and the front. But at the drivetrain shop, the guy said because I have a short slip yoke here, the tubing that I would need to make that work, because it was almost 6 feet between the U-joints, the tubing, he said, was just too much for a 1710 joint. So he would have had to basically make me a whole new shaft, a whole new stub shaft and slip yoke and all new weld yokes on it and just the whole works. And to do that, it was $1,000 more than to just make it a 2-piece, which is what I opted to do. So I saved $1,000 by having this piece was already the way it was. All he did was replace the bearing and he gave me a new U-joint. So that he didn't really have to do a whole lot to. And this one, he just had to shorten it and put new U-joints on it. So because I didn't go with a 1-piece, I saved $1,000. So the downfall is that I need to now find a place for that bracket to hang the bearing. But for $1,000, I mean, I'll have nothing into parts. I just got a couple bolts and a scrap piece of steel that goes across for a cross member. All it's doing is holding up this drive shaft. So I have to create a cross member to do that. So I have a little bit of scrap steel over here. I might not have what I need, but actually, yeah, this piece will work right here. That's all it needs to be. Nothing fancy. I might even have something better than that. I mean, honestly, it could even be a piece of C-channel or an I-beam or anything. Doesn't need to be fancy. Could be this, but I think this is a little overkill, honestly. You know what? I just found this outside in the scrap pile. I got 2 sets of these. So this is actually like 2 halves that are bolted together. And I have another full one just like this. It was just going to go to the scrap yard, but the measurements in between, I mean, this was a cross member on this truck. One of these actually held up the drive shaft too. So let's just utilize this instead. That way I don't have to do anything other than just clean this up and paint it. I don't need the full thing either. Let's cut those bolts off and just use half of it. So the next thing we need to do is change this yoke right here. For some reason, coming off the back of this transfer case, there's an SPL 170 yoke, and coming into the transfer case, there's a 1710. So I got another 1710, which should be identical to the one in the front, and we just need to get that giant nut off there, and hopefully that will come off without too much trouble, just because it's brand new, but who knows. Question is, can we use the torque multiplier? I think we can. Came right off. Nice. Really didn't feel like firing up the compressor and dragging that giant hose in here with the giant gun. This was a lot easier. Torque multiplier for the win. I think every truck should be required to have one of these so that you can take off your tire on the side of the road. I don't think this thing's got a chance. What?
Grease?
Some sort of something.
Silicone? Smells like silicone.
Yeah, it's silicone. See, hopefully this fits. Yes, sir. I know those holes aren't symmetrical. Problem is this cross member has a big circle right here that's cut out. So I either had to go on this side of it or I had to go on this side of it. And on this side, those two bolts are going to be too close together, giving this whole plate a lot more flex this way. So I opted to go over here, which, yeah, that hole is like right here. So I couldn't go down anymore to at least match the height. I don't know why I'm explaining this stuff to you guys. I'm sure you don't care, but I'm just explaining why it looks sloppy. Anyways, we have drivetrain complete from the transfer case back to the rear end. So now I just need to mount the drive shaft from the transfer case to the transmission, which that's very easy. And then I just need to wrap up a few other things like the cab air. That gives the whole cab like a cushion. So every time you bounce, the whole cab kind of can absorb some of that. So it should be a pretty nice ride, being that I didn't even have shocks before. But not only do I have shocks now, but I also have air ride on the axle, air ride on the cab, and the seats have air ride. So it should be about as comfortable as it gets for a truck like this. It's not going to be a Cadillac, but it might be close to a pickup truck. Closer. I think just for testing purposes, we're going to go ahead and just put a Schrader valve on each one of them airbags, pump it up, and just leave it for now. I won't have any brakes, but don't need no brakes. Alright, so the other day I was running this truck and you guys heard that horrible noise that was coming out of it. That sure sounded like the turbo, right? That's what I thought. I thought for sure I'd be yanking that turbo out today. But I got doing some research. I did a bunch of research and there was a lot of people saying that there's got to be a leak somewhere in the system on the exhaust side, and that's what's causing that. And I'm thinking, no way, that doesn't sound like a leak. That sounds mechanical, not just a rush of air somewhere. So that's like mechanical, something's hitting on something else. So I left it alone for a few days, and then I did some more research, and then I saw some videos that people posted that they had the same kind of sound, and it wasn't the turbo. So then I thought, let's see, let's find out. Let's inspect this system and see if there's anything that we're missing here. So I got looking over the whole system. I couldn't find anything. And right as I was about to give up, I found this. All right, so look at that. Man, that thing sure is blowing right out. More than just the one spot, too. Wow, I can't believe I had any boost pressure at all. This turbo sounded great. I was loving the sound of this turbo, but with that leaking, that turbo is only going to sound a whole lot better when I put it back together. I don't know how this passed the quality control inspection, but I didn't take that turbo off or put it on. I had one of the guys do it, so I should have inspected it. So let's go get a new gasket, put it on, and let's see what this thing sounds like. Alright, so I got that all cleaned up. Brand new gasket. Had to order it. I'm excited to put it in. I also cleaned up the mating surface on the truck, on the exhaust manifold. So let's put this back in and see if that noise went away. Alright, so we made a lot of progress in this video. Just getting this thing to run and then drive, that's a huge accomplishment. And we got a bunch of other things done too. So I'm really excited to move forward with this truck. I finally see some light at the end of the tunnel. If you guys have been watching this for a while, you know that I had a lot of setbacks in this build, but it is finally starting to come together. I'm so glad. We still have a lot of work to do, but at least I'm encouraged now. I had to walk away from this truck for a long time, and I don't know, I didn't even really want to work on it, but at the same time I kind of figured, you know what, I hate leaving things forever, because then you start forgetting more and more as time goes on. So I figured, you know what, it's never a better time than right now, and just let's get going on it. So that's what I did, and here's where we're at. So I do hate going backwards with some things, like the tank is going to have to be pulled, and then we need to polish that. It does not look good the way it is. I wouldn't have minded the matte finish that it had before, but now it has like half matte and half kind of shiny, so we'll just have to polish that up. I need to put the rims on here. A lot of people were asking why I don't have the rims on here. Well, it really doesn't need the rims on here yet, and I'm also doing work on those too. I got aluminum rims and I had to polish those too, and those are probably further along than that tank is, but they're still needing a lot of work. Anyways, the next video on this truck is going to be running all of the air lines, getting everything hooked up, which there's a lot of stuff. We got air ride seats, air ride cab, air ride axle. We also have to put air to the new transmission because that's a 10-speed, so the air switches it from low to high. So you go 1 through 5th in low, and then you switch it to high, and then that goes 6th through 10th. So you need air to flip that solenoid from 5th to 6th. Also, I need air to the transfer case as well as brakes. So that in itself is a huge task. So I got all new air lines. We'll be running everything in the next video, and then we can worry about stuff like getting some lights hooked up, getting the front end buttoned up here with the hood, and then probably after that, the next video might be building the bed for this, which I'm really excited for. I can't wait to build the bed for this. And that will kind of make this a truck again. And then we're also going to put a pintle hitch on the back. I got to cut the frame back here too. That's longer than it needs to be. I think I'm going to cut it right here. So then I think I figured out that I'll have like a 9-foot bed, possibly 10. I could go 10 if I wanted to. I don't know if I really need to though. So we also need to put a drive shaft on the front from the transfer case to the front axle. I also need to do an exhaust system on this, and I want to do something really special with this. I think I'm going to incorporate it into the bed. So the headache rack will have the exhaust built into it. I want to do something that sounds really nice. This truck deserves to have a really nice sounding exhaust system. I don't want it loud. I just want it nice sounding. I want to hear the turbo. And this truck actually has an exhaust brake too, but I don't think you're really going to hear it that well. These DT 466 exhaust brakes are just, they're not very loud. They kind of sound more like a whooshing sound instead of like a, you know, a typical N14 sounding kind of exhaust brake. So it's definitely going to sound very wimpy with the exhaust brake, but at least it's there and at least it's something. So I guess that's it for this video, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.